Hey, this is Brock from Eagle Crest Studios, and today I'm going to be showing you how I can turn this old piece of barnwood into a beautiful cutting board that's going to last a lifetime. So the first thing we need to do in this project is to glue the piece back together. Because this piece of barnwood was out in the sun, in the heat for over 100 years, it's split down the middle, which is typical. This isn't really a big issue because we have the matching piece side by side. So all we have to do is just use some Tybond 3 glue. Because this is going to be a cutting board, we want it to be safe for food grade stuff, but also make sure it's waterproof as well, because if you wash it or it gets in your sink, you want to make sure this piece lasts a long time. So that's the first thing I did here, was I just glued these two pieces together and clamped them up and let them sit for about 24 hours before moving on to the next step. Now this next part here isn't actually critical to the structure of the cutting board, but it's more for aesthetics. So I've always liked the bow tie look, and I bought this bow tie model off of Amazon. It's super nice because they have a variety of different bow ties all on one little plastic sheet. What I'm using here is the 2-inch bow tie, and it actually works very well for what I'm doing here on this project. Now what I need to do next is actually cut out the area for the bow tie. So what I'm doing is clamping my piece of wood actually to the Amazon piece, which is the bow tie cutout. Now I made a mistake here, and I originally thought it'd be good to use a drill to try to drill this out, but then I realized it's making such a mess and really tearing up my wood. So after a big fail right here, I ended up actually going in and using a chisel, and I thought that would work. But then again, the chisel is not doing the job. It's not giving me a clean cut like it should. So then as a last resort, and what I should have started with, I went with my router. Now the reason why I thought the router was the best option was because it gave a very smooth and clean cut. It was also the easiest to use because rather than pounding on this piece of wood and potentially splitting it, this router made a nice clean edge. I was able to follow my stencil, and it gave me a great look. I think from now on I'm going to be using this, and I think it's the best way to go when trying to make a bow tie jig to put your piece together. So what I did here is I'm just cleaning up the edge of my stencil, and then once I actually made the cut with my router, I then am going to go back and use my chisel just to get a nice sharp edge. While the chisel wasn't good for taking out the meat of the project, it was good for cleaning up the edges because I had a nice flat surface I could push down on. In case you haven't heard this in the prior videos, I love these chisels. They're a wedding gift I got from one of my buddies from New Hampshire. So Ryan, as always, every time I use these, I think of you, and I appreciate your gift very, very much. Now getting back to it, what I need to do now is actually make the bow tie. So I have a piece of black walnut here, and I thought this would be a good contrast because this is barnwood, so black walnut wasn't typically used for barnwood, but it's going to have a nice dark colors just like the barnwood has. If I were to use something like ash or maple, I think it'd be a little bit too light and might contrast. Now here's another mistake I made. I'm trying to use my jigsaw to cut this out, but as you'll see here, boom, I just crush it. I don't know why it cracked. I think it was so thin. I tried it again over here, and I thought this might be a better option, so you can watch me struggle, and then I crack it again. So in order not to crack your piece, I recommend using a chisel and also using your router. I think these were two great options that were allowing me to get a nice clean edge for my bow tie that I was able to put in the hole. Now let's get back to this. So now that I have my thing cut out, I'm putting my bow tie in the space. I'm just using the back of my chisel to pound it in, and then I switch over to a board so I'm not beating up my actual bow tie, and the scrap piece of wood is taking the blunt of the force. Now what I'm doing here is I want to make sure if there's any gaps in between there, they're filled in. So I just use the excess wood scraps and the wood shavings that I've used from all my cuts and sanding and just mix it right in with the glue. This gave it a good seal and also made it look like it's a nice tight fit. So what I'm doing here is just because I don't have a plunge router, I'm drilling with my drill to put in there, and then I'm able to drop in my router from there. So this is a good way to get started when you're working on a project and you can't get in there and you don't have a router. So I'm just working this whole project right now and taking my time. The reason why you don't want to rush something like this is because if you cut in there and you make a bad cut, one, you could damage your stencil, which really does suck. But the second part is too, is that if you do that, you can't really repair your piece that well. If you have an odd shape or a big gash in there, only thing you can really do is fill it in with glue and some scrap wood or something like that, and it really won't look good. So make sure you take your time when doing these bow ties. In the end, it's going to look so much better. Now this next part, I just kind of mixed it up and did exactly what I did before. I just put a piece of scrap wood over it, used a hammer, and made sure I pounded that in. And it's okay if these are sticking up a little bit. In fact, it's actually good because when we come back with a sander, we're going to use a belt sander to make it nice and flush, and that will all get taken care of and no problem. So now that I have 2 of the 3 bow ties in, I'm putting in my last bow tie. And like I said before, none of this is really structurally required because we already have the glue and it's a nice tight fit. However, I think it gives it a decorative aspect, but also too, if you have a project that you're missing a piece of wood or it doesn't fit exactly as tight as it should, the bow ties do offer structural support and can help your piece stay together for a longer period of time. Also, it just makes it look a lot more professional and a lot better in the long run. So as I talked about before, we do have the bow tie sticking up a tiny bit, which isn't really an issue and is actually good for the project. So what I'm doing now is taking my hand sander, and this belt sander is actually going in and just shaving off the top bit of the bow ties. And once we do that, it will look nice and clean, and it'll also look smooth as well. So we'll do the belt sander, and then we're going to come back with the oscillating sander. Now once I'm done with the belt sander, I'm just using my oscillating sander to go from 60, 80, 100, 120, 150, 180 to 200 grit. I know it's a lot and it probably seems like overkill, but the benefit of this is that you get a nice smooth surface and you don't have to worry about anything, any splinters or anything coming up. Now this one part here was a little bit loose, so I went back in and just glued it and added a little bit more sawdust, and it seemed to do the trick pretty easily. So now that everything has been taken care of, we just let it dry for another day, and then I took it out of the clamps. The good thing was, it's about 95 here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so it dried in no time. Now what I'm doing here is just cutting off the excess. So this piece was originally about 36 inches long, and I didn't really need a cutting board that big, so I cut it down about 8 inches off to give it around 28 inches, which I thought was a nice hefty board, but also still allowed it for it to be usable and maneuverable in a kitchen. Now I did have some leftovers from that cutting, so I did want to give it a little bit more of a sanding just to clean up the edges and make sure everything was nice and smooth before I moved on to the next step of doing the routing of the rollover edge. So as you'll see in this next clip right here, what I'm doing is using a 1/4 inch roundover bit for my router, and basically this whole point of this video is basically saying how versatile a router is. I use it for so many things on this project, so I'd highly recommend you get one if you are into woodworking. They're not that expensive. I think mine was like 80, 90 bucks, and I've used it for so many different things that I couldn't be more thankful for it. So I'm doing it here while my head is in the way. I'll tell you a little bit about how it's just a 1/4 inch roundover bit, and what this is doing, giving it a nice clean look while also making it professional. So because this is a barnwood piece, I didn't want to do anything too fancy with this because it kind of takes away of the barnwood look. If we had a bunch of fancy designs and juice grooves and all these different things, it wouldn't even look like a piece of barnwood anymore. It would look like a piece of, beautiful work, but it just wouldn't fit the vibe. So you wouldn't take a Lamborghini and put it in a parking lot. At the same time, you would not put a tractor and put it in a showroom. So it's just, you got to put the right environment for whatever the device you're using. So we're almost done here, and the last thing I want to do is called water popping. So what we're doing is we're actually soaking the wood and just using a spray bottle just to spray the top. And what this is doing is, one, not only cleaning out all the dirt and stuff from the woodworking shop and everything else, but it's popping the grain, so it will almost feel furry when you touch it afterwards. And then we're going to sand this down one more time. And the reason why we do this is because the first time, if we didn't do this, would get wet and you touched it, you would see and feel how rough that piece of wood would actually be. So now that we let it wet, we let it dry, and then we sanded it, we're now all set. We're pretty much onto the final stages, which is going to be what we're doing here, which is clamping the side on. So what this is we want to make those hand grooves. When you go to reach on the side of the board, this is a big piece, you can't get your fingers under it. You have these side grooves that you can use to lift it up and also control it. So what I'm doing here is measuring the width of it, which is roughly 12 inches wide. So I want to mark my center a little bit under 6 inches, and then I'm going to mark 2 inches off of that. So I make my center mark, and then I'm using the 4-inch mark to measure 2 inches from each side. So it would be a 2 and then 6 right here. Now that I have this all set up, I just clamp a flat piece of wood to my bench. So this is going to be used as my guide. Some people make jigs for this. I think it's a great idea. I personally don't have one, but I'm going to be doing that at some point. So what I did here is just create a test run before turning on, making sure my path is straight. I can see I'm becoming a nice straight line in the center. And now all I have to do is turn up my device and we're all set. Let's give it a shot. So thankfully it worked out great. I was worried about this because if I messed it up, there's really no going back. So now that that's all done, all we have to do are add the adjustable feet. So what these are little pieces of metal, basically screws you screw in, and I put a little bit of glue and also pounded them in. And what this is going to be doing is holding the feet, and then we just screw the feet right in. So it's really nice because it can also level out your cutting board. And in case you have any warping or anything down the road, you can just adjust those and it will help straighten it out. So last part is just putting the beautiful cutting board oil on this, and what this is doing is it's actually sealing in and cleaning off everything that's going on with the wood, but it also gives it a nice great popping look. So you can see how brilliant all the colors are now that I put this on, and I just spread it on with a paper towel because I knew that would be clean and it wouldn't shed onto the board. Now this last part here is just adding the Butcher Blocks wax conditioner, and I want to note that both of these are food grade safe, but I always recommend double checking your labels because what you might think is food grade safe ends up actually not being food grade safe. So I think it's a good idea just to read the fine print and make sure you're okay. But now that I did that, is actually sealed and also waxed, so it's going to be nice and protected for a very, very, very long time. Now, all we have to do is sit back and enjoy it. This is how you build a barnwood cutting board that will last many, many years. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what your thoughts are, if there's anything else I could have done differently, anything else I could have done better, or anything else you'd like to see. Thank you very much and have a great day.